Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined by the lesser spotted Alex Dicken, our Birmingham City correspondent, who I understand has spent the last 10 days watching Homes Under the Hammer. Hello Alex, how are you?
Hi Brian, you okay?
Yeah, we're obviously recording this on a Thursday in the hours after Birmingham City summarily dismissed, can we say that? Stockport County. It was a bit uphill in the second half, but a very good first half performance. We've got loads of takes and comments from you guys, so thank you very much for that. We'll get through as many as we possibly can. So Alex, we'll rattle on actually. How's the floor looking? You pleased?
I'm really pleased, Brian. I think everyone in the press box and press room last night saw a picture of my new floor. So yeah, my pride. Yeah, to the football, pretty comfortable in the end, I think, Brian.
Yeah.
It was Chris Davies described it as a game of two halves, didn't he? And first half Blues are pretty good. Stockport did have moments, we must say, like 5 minutes in, they could have quite easily taken the lead with a shot that hit the underside of the crossbar. And obviously Ryan also had that big double save. Blues had two moments of their own, obviously took their chances, went in 2-0 and then played a bit of a different game in the second half, just kind of stemming the flow of Stockport attacks and taking their own opportunities to go forward as and when. And I never really worried that Stockport were going to, peg Blues back. They had a couple of pot shots from distance, one which went just wide of Ryan Allsop's right-hand post. But Blues were fairly comfortable, I think. We've had a few of those this season, those kind of routine 2-0 wins. We're still waiting for Blues to blow a team away in League One, but, you can't really complain when they're winning the bulk of the games 2-0.
Yeah, keep your powder dry. We'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, absolutely. It shows football's jeopardy for me, that and the irony that Stockport's two best chances or two best moments came when Blues were on top or in the first half, which was largely Blues half. And yes, Stockport had more pressure and more possession in the second half. But as you say, Ryan Allsop wasn't massively threatened. So yeah, it's the up and down nature of all football, not just League One, I guess. What was your main takeaway? Come up with one talking point that really stuck out for you last night.
I think there are two for me, but one would be Alfie May. I think obviously playing back in the centre forward position and back amongst the goals. I mean, he hadn't scored a league goal since October 1st when he scored against Huddersfield. So to score two, and not just that, I think his performance in general, he looked like the player in the first month of the season, the player who was kind of confidently taking up positions out wide, confidently dropping deep to collect the ball and making good decisions. I think before the first goal, there were a couple of crosses that he'd put into the box when he just drifted out to the right-hand side. And nobody was on the end of them, but they were really, really good deliveries, the type of delivery a striker would want for himself. So I was really, really pleased to see him back in form, more than back amongst the goals. Thought he was really good. And interestingly, afterwards, he admitted that he'd been struggling for confidence. So, I presume that he will stay in that position now because it does work better. The team, at least, works better when Alfie May is at the forefront and Jay Stansfield is in a slightly withdrawn role.
Yeah, we'll come on to what that means for Stansfield and how he adapts to that different role, because one of our correspondents has raised that issue about Jay maybe not looking as sort of making as big as impact, I guess, as you would say, from that deeper position. For me, the thing that stuck out for me was it felt a little bit like the start of the season when Blues were taking care of business and looking very professional and, handling whatever was thrown at them. Last night, it was a game of two halves, definitely. Some of Blues' early play was very good in the first half. And then in the second half, they were asked a physical question. Stockport went long. I thought Dave Challoner's halftime changes had a real impact on the game. So Blues were asked a lot of physical questions, and I thought they stood up to it. And we are very much getting into the period of the season now where everyone was warning Birmingham City about, wait until November and December and January when the pitches have turned and it's wet and dark, and then we'll find out about your character. And for me, there was an element of that being answered last night. And if you look at the last two league games, away to Exeter, 1-2-0, handled it really well. Exeter were absolutely suffocated last night. Stockport weren't suffocated, but they were controlled, I would say, by Blues. So yeah, those convincing, really convincing. Not spectacular, not the thumping that everyone's saying is coming, but another good professional job. And points per game ratio, they're marching on, aren't they? They really are. Alex, there's so many questions. Actually, no, there are loads of questions. But before we get onto that, I just want to raise one thing that hasn't been picked up upon, and it was a word that Chris Davies said last night in the press conference that stuck out to both of us a mile, didn't it? We've referred to it on this podcast before about Blues being figured out. Somebody, the opposition teams had worked them out by sitting in a low block and just frustrating and waiting and dealing with whatever came into their box. The Sutton United principle. Chris Davies said last night, in the first half, we had a lot of possession and a lot of control. They were quite passive, 5-4-1, and here comes the word, following the template that a few other teams have used against us recently. And that it's interesting that template wasn't lost on Chris Davies, was it? That really leapt off the page when he said it, if that's not a terribly mixed metaphor, didn't it? What do you think he meant by that, and what do you take from those comments?
He might as well just come out and say he doesn't like the way these teams play, mightn't he? It's go. I mean, dates back to the Northampton game for me. They were not long after Sutton, weren't they? And they were very, very, very passive and just kind of sat inside their own 18-yard box for the majority of the game and just soaked up pressure and hoped more than anything that Blues would miss chances, and they did miss a lot of chances. And then 1 punt forward and suddenly a couple of mistakes and Blues have given away 2 points. So I don't know whether it's template, because you're not playing for anything. Like a team like Northampton, they didn't really play for anything in my eyes. They just kind of sat back and hoped for something. There was no kind of pattern for me in terms of the way they progressed forward. They just waited for mistakes, and a few others have done that. I think Stockport, to be fair to them, did have a little bit more about them than that. I thought they had some quality, like especially those chances early on in the first half. The first chance was a really, really good pass from Louis Barry to put in Will Collar. And, I thought he took it a little bit early, but, he almost caught Ryan Allsop out, didn't he, with a really good shot. So, and you think of the chance for Barry and Kyle Wotton, where the double save from Allsop, they've worked that really well down the right-hand side to get to pull the ball back. So I think they have a lot more about them than that. I don't think they strictly follow the template. But it was interesting that Chris Davies saw it that way. I thought they were a little bit more adventurous. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think their defensive line was certainly 30 yards higher than Northampton's had been. Yeah. But they didn't press. They did leave space in behind for Blues, and Keshi Anderson capitalised on that twice, didn't he, for the 2 goals? So. Whilst we'll probably go on to talk quite positively about Stockport and Dave Challoner when we get onto it, strictly speaking, the Northampton and the Sutton template wasn't replicated. I suppose what was similar was that they didn't, they did sort of just say to Blues, okay, you come and try and break us down a little bit. They didn't press massively, frenetically. So, yeah, I enjoyed it from the point of view of, well, League One opposition has presented us with this issue to overcome, and it feels a little bit like Blues have worked out how to overcome it in the last couple of games. So, yeah. Just quickly on it, I don't really have that much of an issue with these teams playing the way they are against Blues, to be honest. No. I mean, it can be really boring for us to watch Blues sit there for 90 minutes with 85% of the ball and just trying to probe and pass their way through a team. But, the sum of Blues parts is way better than anything else in this league. So, they're not going to go toe-to-toe and match Blues up, are they? Because they're simply going to lose. It's like no team really does against Man City, do they? So it's the same kind of scenario in this league. I think there are better ways to do it. Like I think Charlton did something really good where they pressed Blues relentlessly, had really good pace in the forward areas and caused Blues problems and took the game to Blues even without that much possession. So I think that's probably the template. I don't think anyone else has really done that. Reading looked good at the start of the season, but that was Reading,
a very different Blues team, wasn't it? I mean, very few of those players are now in the Blues 11, so it was a game in isolation. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, whether anyone else can do what Charlton did, because I think they're the only team that outplayed Blues, even though admittedly it was at a time where Blues were, probably absolutely knackered because they'd played a sequence of games with the same 11, hadn't they, and played very well and won all those games, so they're probably just burnt out.
Yeah, and can our opponents, do what Charlton did on heavy pitches with two or three games a week for the next 5, 6 weeks, 2 months sort of thing? Yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to the comments and the questions that supporters have made, because there are tons of them. In no particular order, so this certainly isn't a dig at anybody. Danny Godwood has asked, thoughts on Stansfield's overall form? 1 league goal from open play since Rotherham in September. I know he doesn't set his transfer fee, but it is understandable for us to expect a bit more from someone that should be head and shoulders above at this level. My initial response to that is that feels a little bit harsh, and I'm not sure quite why. Explain. Do you agree it feels harsh? And explain to me why.
I had to check the stat, because I was quite amazed by it, that he'd only scored 1 goal from open play since that Rotherham game, which was over 2 months ago, wasn't it? And he is correct. I mean, he scored in the league. That is, he scored obviously penalties against Bolton, Shrewsbury, and Exeter, and only scored the 1 from open play against Northampton. So yeah, I think it is a bit harsh, because he's played well in that time. If you look at some of the goals Blues have scored in the games that he's played, he's been quite heavily involved. Even thinking back to that Rotherham game, he scored 1, and he was pretty influential in the other goal that Blues scored that day as well. He obviously scored 2 against Fulham in the Football League Trophy as well. I thought he played quite well at Mansfield. Obviously didn't score, but he was involved in the goal that Blues scored there. He probably could have had 1 or 2 more against Northampton in that game. I thought he was one of Blues' better players against Shrewsbury. Another thing is, he hasn't played all the games, has he? Because there have been there was a little injury issue, and then he didn't start the Bolton game, so he's missed 2 games. Obviously missed the Blackpool game in the Cup. So I wouldn't be worried about Jay Stansfield's form. The thing that kind of is of interest to me at the moment is, can he keep scoring even if he's playing slightly deeper? Because everyone's expecting Jay Stansfield to score a high number of goals this season, given the price tag, and he's got, I think, 7 in 11 League One games. I think 3 or 4 have been penalties, but I'd expect him to hit 20 at least. And whether he can kind of keep up this ratio, playing in a deeper role, where if it stays as it is, you presume that May starts getting back on the score sheet more frequently.
With Stansfield and May balance, May undoubtedly looks happier in the 9 position. I think the team is more effective with May playing in his best position, and I think potentially Jay's got more flexibility or versatility that he could potentially thrive in another position, whereas maybe Alfie's clear and away number 1 position is as the 9. A few people, when he scored his second, said, well, does Jay Stansfield make that run into the 6-yard box and convert from there? I think it's just the way that the sort of the machine functions a little bit, in that the 9 is going to get the majority of the chances, and whichever one of them is not the 9, everyone's going to be fretting about how happy they are. And I know I've been sort of guilty of that myself, worrying about Alfie earlier in the season. So Jay Stansfield's performances, they're not an issue for me. He's not plundering hat tricks every week. I suppose the transfer fee raised expectations that because he's cost 5 times more than any other League One player, he should be 5 times better than any other League One player. I mean, clearly, that's not going to be the case. There's so many other factors involved in there. As I say, Stansfield's form is not an issue for me. He's engaged, he's contributing. I think he'll get his goals, and the world just seems a brighter place with Alfie May scoring goals as number 9 for me. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I also think that Stansfield will get chances to play as the 9 still. May only played 60 minutes against Stockport. Dykes came on for 30. Chris Davies is trying to share the minutes around in that position clearly between those three players, and obviously he's got Lucas Djukovic as well. So I think Stansfield will still get plenty of opportunities to play as the 9 or even play as the 10 just off Dyke. So it wouldn't shock me if Davies changed things around for Barnsley and sprung a little surprise in attack. So yeah, Stansfield will get plenty of opportunities, and even when he moved into a more central position against Stockport, he had that decent chance when Anderson's crossed it in and he's forced the goalkeeper into a good save. So he'll still get plenty of chances.
I wonder if we are in a territory of where we're just looking for problems a little bit. But Danny, it's certainly an interesting talking point. So thanks for raising it. Blues made loads of interesting points, some of which have been repeated later. So we'll pick those up. The one that caught my eye, or two that caught my eye actually, given that Peck doesn't assist or score goals, nor is he particularly defensive, why doesn't Leonard get a chance? Thoughts on that?
I'm not taking Sung-Ho Peck out of the team.
No, indeed.
I think Peck does a lot more. If you look at the way he plays, he's pretty much involved in everything that Blues do, defensively and offensively. So picks up so many good positions. Plays slightly further forward than Iwata and doesn't have as much defensive responsibility. So given Iwata scored 6 goals or whatever by now, you'd probably expect Peck to be contributing as well. But he does so much more. When you think back to, was it the game against Bolton where he was absolutely outstanding? Coming in from the left sometimes as well. I think he's been excellent this season, and I know Chris Davies really rates him. I think I've said before on the pod, I'd say he's Blues' best player and most important player. So I really like Mark Leonard, but he's going to find it difficult to get a sustained run of minutes with those two in midfield. Yeah,
I agree. I've got no way of checking this out, but my immediate sort of response when I saw this take was, I'd love to see how many of Blues goals Peck has been involved in terms of like a pre-assist or something like that, or a key pass that has set somebody away. As I say, I've got no way of proving that that would be that that would settle the argument that Peck is contributing 2 goals, if not scoring or directly assisting them. But he just seems to be the heartbeat for me. The one that is constantly keeping things ticking over. It's a preference, isn't it? I think Peck is at this stage in his career is probably half a level above Leonard at the moment. Leonard's ceiling is very high, and I think I've gone on record on here as saying, hopefully when Blues get to the Premier League, Mark Leonard is the player that Blues have bought over the summer that I could see potentially, coming through the leagues with them. Peck's obviously a little bit older, so he hasn't got as much career runway left. But at the moment, I can't countenance a Blues side without Peck. Other go on.
No, I was going to say, if you're looking for Peck goal contributions or pre-assist, if you think of the goal Iwata scored against Bolton, the volley, Peck rushed through 2 block tackles, didn't he, to win the ball back in midfield and set Alfie May away down the right. If you think of Bielik's winner against Peterborough, it was Peck's clever corner through to Iwata and his cross into Bielik. So he's definitely involved in the making of goals. I'm with you, Brian. I think Leonard will come through. And because of his age, I think he's one that Blues could potentially carry along the journey. I think Peck will be around when Blues, if Blues do get to the Premier League as well. I think he's a Premier League player in waiting. But they've got so many good options. He actually does feel harsh on Mark Leonard, and we talk about it every podcast, don't we? And say what a difficult position he is in because he's got those 2 in front of him. But I'm sure he'll get plenty of minutes.
Bluebrum's second take, or the second take that I've chosen, kind of links with a point made by Charlie King. Bluebrum says another game with Davis at the back and another clean sheet. And Charlie King says Bielik at right back, discuss. Now, these 2 takes are linked, aren't they, Alex?
Yeah. We were speaking about this, weren't we? Because we were a little bit worried about the threat of Louis Barry, weren't we? And him isolating Christian Bielik at right back, because Bielik, I don't think he's immobile, but he's not the build to have a speedy winger, diminutive winger with a low centre of gravity running at him. But he coped with him really well in the few one-on-one situations that he had. I think Iwata did a really good job as well, going over there and covering the spaces and preventing Barry from coming inside and going past Bielik. I think it's just a way of getting all three centre-backs into the team. I think Ben Davies has been so exceptional in the games that he's played that Chris Davies has found it really difficult to leave him out. He was obviously fortunate that Ben Davies was ill for that game against Northampton, where he had that difficult decision when Bielik came back from injury. But since the Shrewsbury game, he's obviously put Ben Davies back into the 11. And Blues have been better defensively with him in the team. I do think he is the most reliable defender because he doesn't take risks. He is the one of the three who won't take a risk. He's just a natural defender. He heads it, kicks it, plays it simple to Cochrane left to him, and all Clara on his right or into midfield. So I really like him. He's kind of an unassuming, no-nonsense defender, isn't he? There's kind of no thrills to it, but he's just a good all-round defender.
I think the defence has a balance with it, to it, when Ben Davies is in it as that left-sided centre-back. So, yeah, Ben Davies, for me, it has to start now. I think the stats, the clean sheet stats bear that out. As I say, the side and the defence look more balanced. So absolutely, it then becomes a question of, which fullback are you letting forward? Do you have the right back going forward, as in Ethan Laird, or do you have the left back going forward, as in Alex Cochrane? And sort of the side that doesn't go forward requires the third centre back, doesn't it? For me, I think Cochrane's delivery and his overlapping is really, really good. So I like that from that side. I like Keshi Anderson. I think Keshi Anderson's done well since moving on to the right as well, onto his more natural side. And is Christian Bielik really a right back when Blues have got the ball 70% of the time? No. He's not in terms of, you think back to the defensive right backs like a Gary Neville or a Danny Mills or something like that, play defenders first that did their defending, and sort of stayed in their right back home. Bielik isn't playing it that way. I think the balance is about right. I share the concern, about him being isolated by a nimble, agile little left winger. And I think there were elements of that at Exeter when Vincent Harper ran at him a couple of times and Bielik picked up a booking. I think last night, Blues' plan, and Dave Challoner said this when I spoke to him, he said the minute Blues got a goal ahead, they were able to send Tomoki Iwata over to help Bielik with Louis Barry and sort of snuff that out, and snuff it out they did, didn't they? So, yeah, again, interesting talking points. I think both Alex and I tend to come down on the side of you need to get Ben Davies in the side, so therefore you need to manage the other positions in the defence.
Yeah, and
Stuart Roberts.
Sorry, Brian. It's worth noting that Clara's on 4 bookings, Cochrane's on 4 bookings, Anderson's obviously already suspended, so there could be plenty of rotation that back 4 as well. With Ethan Laird potentially coming back in, Clara missing a game, and it being a Bielik-Davies partnership, which I don't think we have seen yet. Those two at centre back together in league games. So, yeah, there's room for rotation, and the squad's obviously big enough to cope with it. Yeah,
indeed. Stuart Roberts has asked, why do we not keep May or Stano up on the halfway line when we're defending corners or a free kick in our final third? Frustrates the hell out of me, gives us an outlet and keeps 2 of the opposition players back there too. Seems to be the modern thing, doesn't it, that teams don't leave a player up. I have to say, I hadn't necessarily noticed this with this version of Blues. But if Stuart has, I'm assuming that's right. Have you picked up on that?
I had a fan mention this to me at Shrewsbury, and it may well have been Stuart. I've seen it, yeah. I Stockport did exactly the same thing, to be fair. When Blues had a corner, everyone was back, and obviously Blues are the same. So I think Chris Davies has touched on it earlier in the season that, a very small percentage of goals are scored from counter-attacking from a team's set piece. It's minimal goals. Not many teams have got someone like an Adama Traore who can, run the length of the field in a matter of seconds and get away. I don't think Blues have got any of those players. They've probably not got somebody speedy enough to kind of break break away straight away and score. Alfie May and Jay Stansfield certainly aren't that type of player. So I think it's just a percentages game. You know, Chris Davies has said many times that he is a pragmatist. And I think he's just playing the percentages there, in that there isn't that great a chance that Blues are going to score a goal by breaking from a corner.
Yeah, I think we'll move on, Stuart. It's an interesting point you make, but, you know, I think, you know, you see a lot of sides that don't leave one up at the moment. Simon Ev, I'm going to guess that that's Simon Evans. He says, am I away with the fairies for thinking that we need an injection of pace from the back two? I assume he's referring to the centre-back pairings. As individuals, they play well one-on-one when no pace required. We've been caught out by long balls, and precision passing needs to be addressed at all in January or next season. And CK Watt wrote, we rode our luck again at the back. A different match of the ball hits the bar and goes over the line. Lack of pace at the back is a big issue that needs addressing in the summer. I would say it's never a bad thing to have pace, and you'd rather have it than not have it, wouldn't you? But I don't see it being a massive issue at the moment. You've got me at it now. If Blues get promoted into the Championship, they will come up against quicker attackers. And at that point, potentially, well, yes, they probably will need, you know, a bit more gas at the back. There are other issues like sort of spacing of defenders and you know, and what you're asking of your, how quick your fullbacks are, and what you're asking of your sort of double pivot, your two holding midfielders, aren't they, that can compensate for a lack of pace, and obviously you can drop a bit deeper. Blues seem to have enough answers for me not to be uncomfortable with the fact that neither Clara nor Davis nor Bielik is an absolute flyer at the moment. Yeah.
Awata covering Bielik in his battle against Barry is a prime example of that, isn't it? In that the way that you can kind of work the system so that, you know, you fill those spaces and don't allow someone who's not necessarily quick to become isolated against a nippy winger or a striker. I think naturally the way the game is going, in that kind of more teams now are playing possession-based football and committing players forward, you do tend to, or managers do tend to prefer centre-backs who are a bit faster. I actually don't think Ben Davies is slow. No. I've watched him. I don't think he looks fast. Like, looking at him, he doesn't look like he's running very fast. But having watched him against a couple of speedy forwards, I remember Charlton, the name's going to escape me, the guy who really caused Blues problems that day. Not Matty Goddard, the other one. Davies kept pace with him a few times, and he was very quick. And there have been a few others. I don't think Clara's necessarily slow. I think he is susceptible to a little bit of pace on the outside. And Bielik, I've always said, I don't think he's slow. I think Davies is probably the fastest of the three. I don't think it's not a massive issue for me. I'm probably just rambling now. It's not a huge issue for me, but I don't think any of them are hugely slow. I don't know.
Tyrese Campbell, was that the one you were referring to?
No, it wasn't. Carnu.
Yeah.
That's him. Yeah, he played well.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on because we have got quite a lot to get through. Marco, also talking about pace. The only thing missing from this team is genuine pace, ball carrying ability out wide. Hansen and Wright returning will help, but a wide man who beats his man can come inside and is a goal threat, would transform this team and help finish teams off. Poku might be a bit ambitious, but perfect. I think most of League One and half the Championship dream of Poku getting their hands on Poku, don't they? Not going to happen, I wouldn't have thought, in the January transfer window. Bit more thrust and incisiveness from the wings. I think we've made this point in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, that is one position I look at and think, you know, Blues have got the spine of a really good team going into the Championship, or, you know, if they get there. I do think there's probably room for improvement recruitment-wise on the wings. I think Keshi Anderson's been the best of the most consistent of the four this season. Nakayama's clearly a project for Chris Davies to work with and develop with a lot of potential. Hansen plays the system really well, but his numbers aren't that good. You'd like to see more from him when he's back. Wright was doing really well, then got injured at the wrong time, but he was making an impact as a sub. And I do think, you know, no player likes to be, you know, pigeonholed as a sub, but I do think that role quite suits him. So I think that's probably an area, if Blues do get promoted, they are going to need to look at, because they're going to, you come up against Championship wingers. You look at someone like Borja Sites for Norwich. He's got, I think, 15 goals from left wing this season. So the quality of those teams, and then Norwich aren't even, right up there competing for promotion. They're, just outside the playoffs. So the quality of player is much higher in the Championship, and that is an area I look at the Blues will probably need to strengthen. I don't think it's a necessity going into the January transfer window, to be honest.
No, I don't. I still think there's plenty. The players you've mentioned there, we've only really scratched the surface. Hansen's only made 8 starts, since coming to a new competition. Yes, he hasn't burst out of the blocks in the way that maybe Thor did initially. We're coming on to Thor in a bit. It's going to be painful. Scott Wright, I think you're right. I think a lot of his best work has been done carrying the ball through central areas rather than sort of chalk on the boots going outside, round the back sort of thing. I think Keshi showed the value of, holding width and, getting to the byline and pulling balls back last night. But as I say, I'm rambling again. I just think that there's still more to find out about the options that are there. So again, not a desperate January lurch to a random transfer for me. We'll revisit this issue in the summer. Hopefully Blues will be up a league. Then, they've all got 30, 35 games under the belt, and then we can go, right, well, what do we know about Emil Hansen, or what do we know about Scott Wright, and how they might adapt into the Championship. But if Marco's saying that, that is an issue to think about, I would tend to agree with him there. Tom, or at Blue Sabre, whichever you prefer, how many spots are left in the EFL squad list if we wanted to strengthen? It's not completely clear with Roberts still in it. You've looked into this, Alex, haven't you? Clear that up for us, please.
Yes, I've done a bit on this. So League One's slightly different to the Championship. So you're allowed a 22-man squad plus, goalkeepers, basically. So goalkeepers don't count towards your squad list. So it's only outfield players. Blues named 21. So they have one space left still, because Alfie Chang wasn't named in the squad. He was the only senior player left out, because obviously he's coming back from injury and won't play between now and January anyway. And Tyler Roberts, like you say, was included, weirdly. He was the only one of the lone players who went out who was included, but I think he's also the only one who's over the age of 21, with Hall and Donovan obviously being under. So they could take him out of the squad. If he's on loan at Northampton for the second half of the season or elsewhere, they can just take him out of their own squad, and then they'll have 2 spaces, so they can add up to 2 players in the January window. And because Blues have a lot of homegrown players, even Christoph Clara and Christian Bielik count as homegrown players in these rules, because they've obviously been trained at English clubs in their youth. Blues don't need to worry about signing players from overseas. They can do that. So they've got 2. They can have 2 spots if they take Roberts off the list.
Just widen it out briefly, because I no doubt we'll talk about the January transfer window ad nauseum over the next few weeks. What are you expecting? The jungle drums are starting to beat a little bit about there being a bit of activity in January. What do you think will happen?
Yeah, speaking to Chris Davies about a week or so ago about it, I think mainly what he's thinking is that he wants to keep the squad the same, as in numbers-wise. He doesn't want to lose anything. He's expecting a couple of players to knock on his door and say, I've not played much football in the first half of the season. I think I need to go elsewhere. I think when you think of that, the obvious candidate is going to be Dion Sanderson, as he played 6 games, I think. 6 or 7 games. So he's not really going to get a look in with those 3 centre-backs we've mentioned when Chris Davies is trying to cram them all into the starting 11. And he's not even making the bench. So he is one I'd look at, maybe if there's interest elsewhere, there's a deal to be done there. But again, if he goes, Chris Davies has made it clear that he would obviously need to be replaced. So I think it's just going to be a case of reacting to what players want to leave. Maybe there'll be a player that Blues can't resist somewhere that they've seen and spotted and have the opportunity to sign now and can't wait. So that again could happen. knowing Blues, you don't expect it to be busy because they've got such a big squad, but it will end up being busy.
Absolutely, yeah, indeed. They won't be able to resist the candy shop, will they? Yeah, we could talk about that for the next hour. So no doubt we will end up doing just that in the next coming weeks. But we'll move on from now. BCFC Stato Blues have kept 7 of their 8 clean sheets this season. When Ryan Alsop is the goalkeeper ahead of Peacock Farrell, is the live, inverted commas, competition between the goalkeepers finally over for now?
Chris Davies wouldn't tell you it is. I don't think. No. Whenever I ask him a question about Alsop, he kind of refers to his goalkeepers. So
he does. Did it again last night?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But I think it has to be, doesn't it, at the moment? And Alsop's got the shirt. I think he's probably got maybe 1 or 2 mistakes in him before a question is even raised over whether Blues should change goalkeepers again, because Peacock Farrell had more than 1 or 2 mistakes at the start of the season, didn't he, and a couple of reprieves. So he's done so well. I think you said to me last night, you're never worried when he's got the ball at his feet. He whips passes into players.
I don't know if I went that strong.
You know, it might be someone else then.
No, but he just looks. We were talking about it, but I don't think I use the phrase "never worried." I do have the odd palpitation at times. But yeah, go on. He does look very calm and composed and in control. Yeah,
he's superb with his feet, and I just think he just gives the whole team confidence, doesn't he? Whereas Peacock Farrell at the start of the season gave me a few nerves in the way that he was playing out from the back. Alsop just looks so assured. And, to match that, Chris Davies will say, he's a goalkeeper, he's got to be good with his hands. He is having big moments in, games where Blues really need him to. When you think back to Lincoln, he saved a penalty at 2-1. When you think back to Bolton, where it was 1-0, and he's made that great save from McAtee. And obviously his double save against Stockport to keep Blues, 2 goals up going into half-time was superb. So, that's the key, the big moments, and Alsop's really delivered. So, fair play to him, because he's taken the chance to represent his boyhood club, and he's making a real name for himself now and becoming a favourite. Yeah,
I've used this phrase before, but last night particularly, I thought he played with real personality, a real dominance and an assertiveness. And I said that to Dale Moon, who was sat next to me last night. And then he rushed out from goal, and he needed one of his defenders to stick it out for a throw-in. So it was a bit of a commentator's curse. But yeah, I thought he was absolutely excellent last night, and there doesn't seem much of a debate for me at the moment. I think he really has sort of taken a grip on that number 1 shirt. MK 2000 and then 3-4 has said. When do you think Blues will win by more than 2 goals? And even, will teams stop parking the bus against us? Go on.
We're all so entitled, aren't we? We're just here thinking when a Blues going to smash a team. I'd be quite content with Blues winning every game between now and the end of the season 2-0, breaking the League 1 points record and going back to the Championship. I think most people would, but I think it will happen. I think it'll happen over Christmas. A nice Boxing Day battering of Burton Albion. That'd be all right, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and say Blues will not hammer somebody 5-0 when they have 70% of possession of the ball. I'm wondering if when they do get a goal or 2 goals up, they do start managing risk a little bit. I look at the Iwata thing last night when Blues got in front, and then Iwata seemed to be helping Bielik more with Louis Barry. Maybe I've imagined that. Dave Challoner mentioned it. So I just wonder if, they get themselves some clear blue water, not maybe as much as we would like. And then, they don't shut the back door or, shut up shop or anything like that. But I suppose manage risk is the best way to say it. So somebody's going to get a 3 or a 4, aren't they? Or a 5. But if you're telling me that they won't win by more than 3 goals, in the rest of this season, then I can see that scenario too at the moment. So, I do think it's unfair to be too critical of League 1 sides with budgets to, a fraction of what Blues is, to criticise them too much about sitting deep and parking the bus, don't you?
Yeah.
Indeed. So I've jumped a couple ahead there. Jobs to Dave said the rot has stopped. Happy days. My only worry is Alfie May doesn't look particularly happy in his post-match last night. I might be reading too much into it, but he seems unsettled. Now, we didn't get to do Alfie May last night, did we? Alfie May was on press duties, but someone far more important than us required Alfie May's attention just as he was about to come into the press room. So, thoughts about Alfie May? He did look relieved when he scored, didn't he? The celebration down on the knees. That said something to me.
Yeah. I probably would. Somebody else has mentioned this to me, but I probably wouldn't read too much into it. I think it might just be, like you say, Brian, the relief of ending what for him was a bit of a goal drought, wasn't it? Going 7 league games without a goal. Obviously, he hasn't been playing in his preferred position in that time as well. He hasn't been playing particularly well compared to what he was playing like at the start of the season either.
Missed a few chances.
He has, yeah. And, you know, he mentioned in his post-match interview that, you know, he said to himself in the car when he left home that, you know, he's got to kind of turn his form around and get back to the Alfie May that was playing better at the start of the season. And, you know, like we've said previously earlier on the podcast, he looked like the player of August who was, you know, terrorising League One defences, you know, dropping deep, drifting wide, but more importantly, being in the box when it matters. And he hasn't been that player for the last 3 months. To be fair to him, probably not by his choice, but he's been doing a job for the team. But I thought he looked really good last night, and I probably wouldn't read much into his demeanour afterwards because, you know, we know he was also enjoying a bit of time with Tom Wagner and stuff in the executive boxes afterwards. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom for Alfie May.
It's almost like he'd prefer to do that rather than speak to the press, isn't it? I mean...
No, I was going to say, Brian, no one's more important than you in my eyes. I was stunned he didn't turn up.
Right, let's move on quickly. Stuart Allen's got a dig in there as well. Brian, any idea why your love child Thor hasn't scored lately? And do you have any ideas on what players and positions Blues might need to improve on? Question mark. Right back, question mark. Let's do Thor, shall we? We're on a break, I think is probably the way to describe it. Listen, there were a couple of moments last night which made me gasp, you know, just with in a good way, with the sort of the body feints and, you know, just his sort of how light he is on his feet and some of the weight of his passing and some of his vision. You know, I still think that was there last night. You know, there's still real moments of real high quality. I wouldn't judge him necessarily by scoring. I think the 2 headers that he missed against Exeter were misses. You know, there's no other way to dress that up. Did he have a chance last night? I don't think he did particularly, did he?
No, I would say when you think of you mentioned the 2 headers against Exeter, there was one last night where I think it was Cochrane who whipped a ball in from the left. It was a decent ball to the back post, and it's Williamson against their left wing back, I think, and he towered over him but lost the header. And I just think in that situation, if someone of his size throws themselves at that ball and really commits to it, they're probably going to make the contact and have a chance of scoring. And I think for him, that's probably 4 or 5 goals a season, isn't it? If he does commit to those balls, we said before the game that he's probably not as good in the air as his height would suggest, or you know that he should be. And I do think that's a thing that I would like to see from him. Just add those goals, but like you say, he's not really your typical 6'4" player, is he? He's more of a kind of a technician. And he's great to watch, like you say, but I'd just like to see that from him, because I think there's been a few headed chances this season. When you look at the Blues attack, and they're all quite diminutive figures, Williamson's the one who could really, you know, make a handful of himself inside the box and add goals to his game that way.
I think, to be fair to him, on defensive set pieces, it is often his head that gets to the ball.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to balance that out. I suppose last night the ball to the back post, if it's Lucas Djukovic, the ball and the defender and the goalkeeper and Djukovic all end up in the net, don't they? Thor is not a massively physical player. He's, you know, not particularly a physical player at all. And if he was 5'10", that would be okay in most people's book, wouldn't it?
Mm.
You know, like a Callum O'Hare size. You know, with the technique and the pace and you know, and I don't think it'd be a massive issue. I think the expectation is that he scores more headers because he is over 6 foot. I don't think he's playing his finest at the moment. I think there was a run maybe 5 or 6 games ago where he seemed to be scoring every other game. He scored against Sutton, didn't he? Mansfield, I think I'm right in saying. Did he score at Lincoln? He did. Oh, he scored a good goal at Lincoln, didn't he?
Lincoln and Peterborough.
Well. Yeah. So he's 4 games without a goal. It's not a massive issue for me. He's played. He's made 14 starts in the league. He seems to be the one player that, along with Cochrane, the 2 players that seem to be starting pretty much every game. Don't mind if he's not flying at the moment. That's absolutely fine.
No, and it's probably our standards have raised, haven't they, this season? But Blues are allowed to lose a game sometimes. The odd game, players are allowed to have quiet games, aren't they? Like Williamson did against Stockport, because there are so many good players in this team that other players will perform and carry the weight for that game. So I wouldn't worry about Williamson's form. I'm sure he'll score soon. Yeah,
no, we're not on a break. We're just maybe not seeing each other as often as we might have done. Still a big Thor fan. Stuart, I'm going to not address the transfer thing at the moment because we risk going back over old ground, if that's okay. Ian Dawson said this, and I agree with this wholeheartedly. I've been very surprised by the quality of the teams in this division. Small clubs, his words, not ours, like Lincoln, and smaller, his words, not ours, like Stockport, have real quality. Is 100 points stroke goals now a stretch? Or do we have another gear as we head for the busy period? Let's denude ourselves of any association with words like small and smaller. Address the issue. I would say I have been pleasantly surprised with, not necessarily with the technical quality, but with the organisation and the game planning of League One opponents. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the tactical setups have really impressed me. When I look at Reading, again, game in isolation, because Blues are a very different team now. They really impressed me on the opening day because they really had Blues' number, I thought, on that day. And they were a good side. Ruben Sellers, obviously, is a coach who's coached in the Premier League, good manager. A few of the others as well. Lincoln, really well organised side. I think they scored too early against Blues. If that goal had come a little bit later, they might have had a better chance of hanging on to it and hanging on to their lead. And there's been a few others. Mansfield. Yeah, because second half, actually, that was the one where Blues completely lost control and were just really out of sorts. And Mansfield could have scored 2 or 3 on top of the goal they did score in that second half. They had some really good chances, and they had the better chances second half. So
Shrewsbury?
Yeah, that was a freakish kind of game for me. I just think Blues were very, very poor, and Shrewsbury somehow, really, really managed to ride that new manager wave, didn't they?
Was that game more about what happened in the penalty areas rather than about game plans? Then
I think so. Although the goals Blues conceded as well were really poor, weren't they, Shrewsbury?
Yeah, we don't need to go there again, do we?
Yeah, I was going to say, don't go there again. But yeah, I completely agree with this point that not necessarily the players individually, but collectively the teams have impressed me. There's only been a few players who've stood out to me and thought, Blues might want to take you on their way to the championship and add you to their squad. But there are some good teams, and the key thing is there are so many teams that you look at the Blues play and say, they could be in contention for the playoffs. And again, Stockport were another one.
I think we'll wrap it up there because you've got a press conference to get to, haven't you? Thank you for your time, Alex. Thank everyone for listening and for the tons of questions. Really thought-provoking questions today, so thanks for that. All that remains is for me to bid you a keep right on.